I'm going to walk you through the process of preparing your mini chest to be glued up into a box. Once you have all 4 of your panels rough sanded and squared, you're going to be giving them to me just to double check and make sure that you're ready. And then we're going to come over here to this shaper. This shaper has what is called the lock miter joint. That's where the corners are going to be locked together with the miter, and it will give you a nice, strong, long-lasting joint to hold your box for decades and generations to come. So this is where we're going to set up, is at this machine. Now, where I'm going to have you place your material is actually on an adjacent shaper. I'm going to have you stack all of your stuff right here on this one, and then I will be putting everything that I cut over right here on the end of this jointer bed, and it'll be stacked there as I process your parts. So we're going to start right here at this shaper, and I will be doing this, like I said, I will be doing this process for you. I will need the dust collector on for this process because there are a lot of chips, and I will also be using my hearing protection because this is a very loud machine. It's more loud than I'm prepared to deal with. So I'm going to turn on the dust collector, and I'm going to start doing this. Just one little bit of advice. It would be very helpful before you come to me to choose on your back which one is your outside face. If you could just put an F on that side, just like you've done with your stiles and rails in the previous processes, that would help this process go a lot more quickly. Our next step is to go over to the panel router, and we're going to be cutting the dado that goes in to fit your bottom. So I'm going to set up over on the router, the panel router next. So I have all my panels, my front, my sides, and my back, and I'm going to set up here at the panel router in order to put the dado in for the bottom. In order to do that, I need to stack all 4 of my pieces right along this ledge in the orientation that I need to cut them. So I'm going to start with my back, since it's generally going to be the one on top. And what I'm looking for is, I'm looking for the cleanliness of the edge. On the side where it blew out, so it's going to be that upside here and this side here, this is where I'm going to be looking at to see which one I put up. And I like this edge. This is my jointed edge, and it really didn't blow out hardly at all on that end, on the shaper for cutting the lock miter. So I'm going to make this up like this. With my sides and my front, it is very obvious what is up, and I always have my inside face facing out towards me on all of my parts. So with my top up and with my inside face facing out, I'm going to cut my dado for my bottom. Now when I use the router or the panel router, I want to make sure that my hand is up here out of the way. This is very important. Why? Because the cutter is going to cut down here. So if I make my cut with my right hand down here, by the time I'm done making that cut, I'll be calling you Stumpy because you're not going to have any fingers left. So make sure that your right hand is up here out of the way. Now notice that there is no dust collection hoses attached to this machine. So it is a really good idea to have a dust mask. Alright, I'm ready to go with my dust mask and my hearing protection, and I'm going to make, on each piece, I'm going to make 2 slow passes. My first pass is going to be my roughing pass. It's going to get the majority of the material. My second pass is a cleanup pass. It's just to ensure that everything is gone to the point where it should be. And the key word here is slow. So I'm going to make my first cut and my second cut, and I'm going to show you a couple things of what I'm looking for. All right, on my first pass, when I am making that cut, I am looking at this bottom edge here. You can see there's a little bit of a dark mark. That's where I slow down. With this cut, you need to pay attention to this bottom edge as you're making this cut. There is a little bit of a blind spot, but if you pay attention, you're going to be able to see that bottom edge. If it is black, that just tells me that you're going too slow. And on this one, it is capable of creating embers. So you need to make sure when you're making this cut that that bottom edge right along here is not black. If it is black, you're going too slow. Just speed it up a little bit, and it's not very much. So just pay attention when you're making those cuts. I'm going to continue to make my cuts. When I'm done with each panel, I'm going to set it over here on the workbench out of my way so that it doesn't impede with what I'm trying to do right here. So I'm going to finish making my cuts. I'm going to put my hearing protection and lung protection on, and then I will finish this process up. All right, I'm done running my dados for my bottom. At this stage, I need you to come to me and let me know that you've run the dados in all 4 of your parts, and I will get you a back. All right, I'm here at the workbench with my box that has had the the lock miter cut on the shaper on all 4 corners, and I have my piece of rough cut plywood. This is not a finished cut size piece. Everybody's is going to be just a little bit different. So at this process, or at this step, we are going to take the bottom and we're going to cut it to fit the opening that we have with our dados. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my tape measure and I'm going to measure, I'm going to step onto the other side here, I'm going to measure the opening in both directions. So I have, right now I have 10 1/8 in my width on the inside. This is a 1/4 inch deep, this is a 1/4 inch deep. 1/4 plus 1/4 equals a 1/2 inch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that 10 5/8 and I'm going to add a 1/2 inch, which is 10 1/8, excuse me, boy, I just gave that up. I'm measuring 10 1/8, I'm going to add a 1/2 inch, it'll be 10 5/8. So I'm going to write that on my end because that's the dimension that I need to cut it to. So 10 5/8, and then I measure the height. I have an opening of 22 13, oh boy, 22 5/16 at a 1/2 inch, and it's going to be 22 13. So I'm going to write here 22 13/16. So I'm going to take my bottom to the table saw and I'm going to cut it to width and to length with those dimensions that I just wrote down. I'm at the table saw, and I have my mini chest bottom that I need to cut down to width and to length. I've got my 22 and 13/16 dimension and my 10 and 5/8 dimension written on the respective ends that I'm going to be cutting. So I'm going to start with my 10 and 5/8 first. So I'm going to set my fence for 10 and 5/8, and I'm going to make this cut. Now I'm going to set it to the 22 and 13. So now I have a panel that's 22 and 13/16 long, 10 and 5/8 wide. Now, a really good idea is to check the fit. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back over to the bench, and I'm going to set my bottom inside their respective dados, and I want to test the fit. So I'm going to go do that now. All right, I have my mini chest bottom. I'm going to test the fit inside their dados by lifting off the one side, and check your different face, your two different faces, and make sure that one looks better than the other. If they don't look any different from one side than the other, then it doesn't matter how you put it in. I like this surface a lot better. It's a lot more clean. There's some color on here that I really don't want, so I'm going to put it in just like this. I'm going to let it slide down, and then I'm going to cap it off with my other side. And I'm looking right here at the joints where my sides meet my front and my back. If these joints for the lock miter are still nice and tight, then we are good to go. We're ready to glue. Plus, if you wiggle it back and forth, that's a really good telltale sign that it's going to work. If it didn't wobble back and forth, either it's going to be a little bit too wide or just a little bit too long. If you get, or if you do see that, if you don't have any wobble on this, then let me know so I can help you figure out what dimension needs to be cut first. But we are ready at this point to set up to glue this box. And I think we're going to walk through that process right now. Your next step for gluing your box together is to make sure, once again, that your bottom is fitting to where it's not holding your joints apart. We are ready to go on this, and our next step is to disassemble this on the workbench so that it's more easily assembled once you start putting glue down. So I just want to point out a couple things here. Always have a sheet of blue paper down. There is going to be a pretty decent glue mess that you're going to have to contend with, and the blue paper is going to help contain most of that problem. So you always want to have a sheet of blue paper down. Over here I've got 4 clamping sticks. These are going to come in really handy to prevent the clamp faces from marring your box surface. And then you also want a bottle of glue handy and ready to go as well. Okay, so the method that I use in order to glue this together is pretty simple to do, and it all starts with the layout. You always want to make sure that you have your parts and pieces laid out exactly like this. So towards you, I've got a side, my front, my back. These could be reversed. And then behind, I've got my bottom, and my opposite side is underneath my bottom. So if you lay it out just like this, once you start laying down the glue, it's going to be very simple to put this all together and minimize the chance of any mistakes or hiccups. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start using a tape measure and my pencil. I'm going to measure down from the top 1 inch, and I'm just marking it on the joint itself in the miter itself. And then from the bottom, from this surface here, I'm measuring in about 1/2 inch. And normally I just eyeball it. It's not something that I have a tendency to be accurate with, but for purposes of this demonstration, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to lay this out with my measurements. I do this on all of them that I glue only because it helps me know where to put the glue when I start laying it down. It's just a really good idea to have these lines handy before you start doing any gluing. So one more time, just as a reminder, make sure that your good face goes to the inside of your box, not the outside. So in this case, it's going to be face up, just as a reminder. When I am starting to lay down the glue, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to put a bead of glue, let me get my pencil, I'm going to put a bead of glue down in this groove in between the two pencil lines. So in between these two lines, I'm going to be putting a bead of glue. Then I'll put a bead of glue from top to bottom along that entire surface. I'm going to put in this case, I'm going to put my front in and I'll put my bottom in. And then I come to this side and I will put a bead of glue down in the groove in between the two pencil lines, and then again top to bottom along that surface. And then I will put my back in. Once I have all of that situated, my back will be out of my way, and then on my other side I'm going to put a bead of glue in between the two lines on both sides, and then I'll come back and put a bead of glue top to bottom along here and top to bottom along there, and I will be able to cap my box. At that point, when you guys are ready to do all of this, once you get everything to that point, then you're going to call for me and I can help you with the clamps. But it's actually very simple just to get somebody to help you do that process. It's not something that I absolutely have to be there to do, because honestly this is one of the more simple glue ups. Just make sure that you have your glue sticks to protect the clamps from the box, and a bottle of glue, and then forgot to mention about the clamps. So I have 7 short eye-bar clamps, and I don't think the camera can pick them up, but they're just right here on the workbench. I like to keep the clamps on the bench, not leaning up against the table. If you have clamps leaning up against the table, they do have a tendency of tipping over and causing issues, potentially getting somebody's feet. So I do like having the clamps on the workbench. The other thing that I want to point out is this is the long direction of the bench. I don't like setting up on the short direction on the other direction because of how long everything is that you need to get glued up. So I just want to point out that this is the long dimension. This is almost 5.5 feet, where the other dimension is actually 4.5 feet. So I prefer you glue it up like this. It's a lot easier. And don't put 2 people on one bench when you're gluing, mostly because you can see I'm pretty much using the entire thing with the clamps and the layout of my box. So just keep that in mind when you go to set up, just 1 person per bench, and as we start going along, you're going to notice that we're going to have several people gluing up in a class period, and the potential of having the workbenches filled with boxes is there. But just keep in mind, when you go to do it, you only want to have 1 person per workbench when you are gluing this up. Okay, now I'm going to start laying down my glue. So I'm going to start by putting a bead of glue down in the groove, just in between the 2 pencil lines. And then I come back and I put a bead of glue top to bottom along that outside surface. I'm going to put my front in, and this could be your front and back, but in this case it is my front. Then I put my bottom in, make sure that my good face is on the inside of the box. And then I come to the other side and I put a bead of glue down in the groove, just in between the 2 pencil lines, and then again back top to bottom along that outside surface. And then I put my, in this case, my back, but this could also be your front. That is looking really nice. Now I can bring the side up by me so I don't have to reach for it. Down in the groove in between the 2 pencil lines, and then top to bottom along these outside surfaces, and then cap it off. At this point you're going to need a helper. Now it could be me, it could be another student. It really does not matter who your helper is, but at this stage you will need a helper. I'm going to take my box and I want to press it down together right here at the top, pivot it away, and then hold on to it. If you do it the other way, it will very easily just fall apart. You cannot hold your box like this because gravity or just other forces, due to how the lock miter is cut, it'll actually help it, or it'll probably fall apart. So you want to hold on to the ends. And then I want to slide the box to one of the edges, and it'll be very apparent why. I'm going to take my clamping blocks and just put them on there. Sometimes these don't want to stay, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just going to grab a clamp. I'm going to start with this side. This side has the tightening lever on it. I want to put the clamp up against the box, and then I'm going to slide this one up. And I want you to kind of notice what I'm doing here. I have the sticks are not right at, they're not even with the face. They're actually back about 1/4 of an inch. The main reason being is if you do have glue start to squeeze out, it'll actually get on your sticks, and then it'll actually clamp your sticks to your box, and that's going to be hard to fix if it does blow it out. I'm going to grab another one. And your helper, the purpose of your helper is to help hold the sticks in place. Just remind them that they need to bring it in about 1/4 of an inch away from the front corner. It'll help you tremendously. And I'm not making these very tight. If there's one thing that you need to understand about this is I just want it to hold enough to where the clamps don't move. If they move, that's going to be a problem. Just tighten them up to where the clamps don't move. If you over tighten it, you're going to break one of the two pieces, and there is no repairing it. So I'm just going to tighten this down. That looks good. Perfect. Okay. I need to scoot my clamps up just a little bit so I can actually reach them. So I'm going to do the same thing on the back. This time I'm going to put my clamp in place before putting my sticks in position. So I'm going to start here with this one. Again, this stick is 1/4 of an inch in from this back edge. Put the clamp head up against the stick, come to this side, put it in position, and then scoot your clamp head up, and then I'm just going to lightly snug this up. This one is not going to, this does not take a whole lot of pressure. There's one mistake that I see over and over, it's over clamping when it comes to gluing up the boxes. Okay, it's not moving, and I'm jiggling the clamp. If it does have a tendency to move, then I'll just lightly tighten it up a little bit more. Now, one thing that I forgot to mention on this other side is that I am, okay, I just made a mistake. I want you to notice the tightening ends. They should be on the top and bottom. They should be on the one side. Kind of glad I made that mistake so I could point it out. But you want the tightening side right here on the top and the bottom. So notice that these two are sticking out this way. That way when I put this one on, they don't interfere, because right now these things will interfere if I put 3 of them on there. But my third one here is going to the other side, and it's not going to interfere. The bars aren't going to interfere with the clamping. Okay, that's good. Now, the last thing that I need to check for before I call this good is I need to check for square. I am taking off the little bit of glue that's on the top, and I'm just measuring the diagonals. I've got 26 and 11/16 there, 26 and 11/16 there. So this is perfectly square. If I had one dimension longer than the other, I would take my 7th clamp and let's say that this dimension in this, or this diagonal dimension is longer, I would take this and I would tighten it, and what I'm doing is I'm pressing this direction so that it will expand out this direction and they would be equal. So if you look at it, if you think about it, it's not going to be very much clamping pressure. In fact, it's going to be very minimal. All you're trying to do is push this so this goes out. That's all you're trying to accomplish. I don't have to worry about any of that, so I am actually going to put that clamp back. Now, when you are done with the clamping, go ahead and leave your box here on the workbench, because lifting these boxes up, they're going to be very heavy and quite frankly really awkward. Just leave your boxes here on the workbench to dry. When you come back the next time, whether it's the next morning or the next class period, I will have removed the clamps from your boxes and I will put them in the project storage room just inside the door on the right hand side on the floor. The last thing that you're going to need to do with this is you want to put your name on here. You should have your name on the inside, front and side panels, but for easy reference, put your name right here on the back edge, not on the front, but on the back. You can write on this back top edge because you're going to be covering it up with a hinge later, and you won't see it at all. So just for easier reference, I am going to put my name using a Sharpie on the back top edge. Once you are done with that, this is ready to dry, and you're ready to move on and start working on the base molding for your box.